Hello, hello, hello. And here we are.
There we went. Here we go. This is, man, it just never gets old. I love that song.
It's every day. Every day it's just, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. I eat that song up. Um, so as you
Is it
may
your
notice
ringtone?
above me, it not yet.
Should be.
It's I need to make it. I need to make that happen. Although, really, the only time I don't get called by anyone, so I don't
That's
use my
true.
phone.
That's true. Yeah, robocalls. That's all I have to look forward to anymore.
Exactly. So that's why I just keep my phone off. So as you noticed, above me is Pavin, which can only mean one thing, that we're going to talk about security today. And next to Pavin is Gadi from Alcide, which I will let them explain all the good stuff we're going to talk about in just a moment. But really cool to once again have another AWS partner on the show where we're going to dive deep into Kubernetes security with Alcide. And yeah, go ahead, Brent.
I was just going to say, I really hope Techie Stories is out there because, this is definitely her topic. So I feel like, obviously she'll get to watch after the fact if she's not here, but I'm hoping she's here. So sound off in chat if you're here and you're a regular.
Yes, and
Yeah.
so the regulars they know when Pavin's on the show, we're talking security and we're talking deep into security.
Yeah.
So
I know Herc Flo, Pavin security guru.
Thanks, Flo. Yeah, thanks. We'll certainly publish on YouTube later, so you can check out, and on the containersfromthecouch.com website as well. So check out all our previous shows from there. But good to be here again, guys. So thanks for joining us, and we welcome Gadi now from Alcide, and he's I'll let you introduce yourself, Gadi, but we've been working for a few years now, and I've been sort of going hands-on. Just for context, we met at reInvent 2018, I think, in Las Vegas.
Yes. Yeah.
But tell us about yourself, Gadi, and also and how it came about.
Absolutely. So first of all, I'm really excited to be here, and the opening theme, it's working. It's good. I mean, it has good tune. I'll definitely can have it as my ringtone for sure. So I'm the CTO and one of the founders of Alcide, and yeah, I mean, we have been partnered with AWS, orange love there. From even, I mean, right from the beginning of the company, and we've been doing Kubernetes and cloud security from day one. And personally, by way of professional background, I've been working with cybersecurity companies, like doing data center security, building firewalls, IPS, all the dirty security stuff, mainly on the defensive side, nothing offensive or shady. And when off keyboard, I'm on my skateboard, so that's kind of non-cloud activity. And
I saw that post you had on LinkedIn. You are pretty good, I could tell.
I try. and God bless Seaward, that helps me, like, not being on planes and do more skating than I used to before Seaward. So trying to keep it kind of positive.
Great.
That's awesome. Did you skate? I see you're at the office. Did you skate to the office today?
No, I had to drive. I mean, it's too far. But I have here somewhere my 4-wheel drive, so it's here.
Nice.
Great.
Satya, good to see you. He says, hello, new week, new set of shows, much excite. So welcome back, man. This is good stuff. We're always excited to come and talk containers. So, and this is especially exciting having Gadi on the show. So I'm really looking forward to learning about Kubernetes security, because I feel like I know a little bit. I feel like I won't embarrass myself when I'm setting up my cluster and everything, but but I know there's plenty more. So I'm really looking forward to this sort of expert level opinion and hearing like what are all the things that I'm not thinking about.
Absolutely, absolutely, yeah. Just to give some context around our meeting and how we work together with Alcide, especially me. Like I had the privilege um, to go to Israel a few years ago and meet some of our team members. We have an office. AWS has an office in Israel, and if you're not aware, I mean, Israel in itself is a melting pot of startups. Like there's so much activity going on, especially for some reasons. There are security startups which are producing so much unique kind of solutions out there. They have amazing ideas. Well, so for context, I mean, AWS Nitro, the new instance types are using a hardware sort of from an Israeli startup we bought, AWS acquired a few years ago called Annapurna Labs, and they are a startup out of Israel. So lots of work going on there. But yeah, Allseed was a startup which I was introduced to really early on, and I had the privilege to work with Guardian and sort of test some of the early solutions which they were working on, which really impressed me. So we said, come on, let's do something around this and talk about it. So we worked together and published a blog on our APN channel. So we have a blog for our partner network, which is particularly dedicated to them, and we wrote a blog around, was it EKS and also the advisor?
Yeah,
right?
exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
You were actually the first guy out of I'll see that actually saw advisor, like very early stage stuff, cutting edge stuff. So, and feedback was good, so that was kind of thumbs up on keep pushing there. So
Great. And
we'll
today
see some of that.
Yeah, we'll see some of that. So talk us about like what products are we going to see today? Like see what do they do, and what's in store for us?
Absolutely. I mean, as Brent mentioned, it's actually let me, I'm not a big fan of slides, but I'll do kind of the walk of shame of slides. When you really look into kind of cloud native security and Kubernetes specifically as a cloud native application vehicle, you can pretty much break the world into two main areas: anything that happens before production or runtime, and then everything that happens, I like to call it pre-flight. So the development cycles, building your microservices, shrink wrapping them as containers, wrapping those containers with configuration, and shipping them as Kubernetes resources to your clusters, wiring them together with config, and then deploying, and then once it's there, it's inside the runtime. And if you're lucky, then you're provisioning your cluster on something like EKS, which, to be honest, the out-of-the-box defaults are way better than provisioning a vanilla cluster. So for you, Brent, if you're doing like EKS, you should know you're safer.
That's good to know. I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah.
I love this division that you have here, though, because in my head, I've kind of thought about. I've never thought of it this simply before. Supply chain environment, and you're right. Like there's so many components that you have to think about, but just lumping them into one of these two areas really helps you kind of simplify. Am I talking about the build, the supply chain, or am I talking about when it's running? And the way you address those things is completely different. So this is awesome.
But you're going to get a headache once you zoom in kind of the next, like the deeper level on what's behind all those boxes, So I wish it was that simple, but the reality is that specifically with Kubernetes, because it's an extremely powerful, platform, it enables you to do so many things and build, complex systems. Complexity oftentimes translates to security kind of challenges, and choices and all that. It's something that, all the moving parts is things that users and people that are getting to know Kubernetes are struggling with. And this is where many of the tools, some of them are open, some of them are commercial, are actually helping those users jump into the water. You can call it day 2. I like to call it the day after Hello World. And if you want to make sure that, it's not goodbye your cluster, you want to kind of have things in control. And this is, I'll dive deeper into that, like some of the stuff what we cover, and we'll see some of the tools that we have, like actual demos. But if you want to get like the serious headache from Kubernetes, here you go. That's kind of cloud native headache. You can see, your container image registry. That's probably your ECR with your EKS cluster. But you can see here a snapshot of some of the weaknesses that were discovered in the past 2.5 months. And all of them are relevant to Kubernetes users. They need to patch their infrastructure just like they need to fix their container images. So that's kind of another angle when you are using Kubernetes as your container vehicle. And at the end of the day, when you're building security for the runtime, which is pretty much the brain of the cluster, the control plane, normally would be hosted inside AWS as EKS. So AWS will take care of the majority of the heavy lifting you need to take care of as far as the management plane, but the nodes are under your responsibility. If you're doing things like Fargate, so that's even being offloaded from you as a user to AWS in this case. But at the end of the day, you really need to kind of take care of all the moving parts, making sure that you are hardening and building your stuff in a proper way, and understanding what does it mean properly in Kubernetes. It's not easy. You need to have kind of auxiliary tools to help you there. And that's what I hope to kind of share and show, taking kind of a little help from a friend, a cloud native friend.
Nice.
Yeah.
I just wanted to say, going back to the diagram before, so this really, by the way, that initial diagram shows you like, wow, when there's a security vulnerability, a CVE, it doesn't just mean there's going to be one. There could be many, and they could be sprawled across your environments. And getting insight into that is hard, right, on your own. So it's tools like this that help you. But the other thing I wanted to talk about, and I'm looking forward to hearing about, is in this CI/CD piece. So as I'm building now, I push my code to Git, and now the magic happens. I need something in there that's going to also magically make sure that it's secure before and after it gets delivered. So I'm looking forward to hearing more about that from you as well.
Yeah, and this is actually an excellent point, because when we as developers build our stuff, even before we do like go live with an application or a new functionality, we want to have some cycles or things that will help us deal with what we built and making sure that we built them right in those engineering cycles or development cycles that we do, which the normal place to do that is CI on test clusters or CD. And again, with Kubernetes, actually, the CD makes ton of importance because of all the automation that happens. It's like CRDs and all the Helm charts that perform like rendering of the actual resources. The only place in time that you can actually understand what the cluster would look like, it's the cluster itself. And once the cluster is stable, then you can actually understand, for example, so actually let's take an example. Let's say that you're using network like Kubernetes network policies, and you want to say, I want to have a network policy on my red microservices, those that have red annotation. And someone is making an honest mistake and kind of remove the red label or annotation from that resource, and all of a sudden, Kubernetes magically drops the network policies. The only way to understand that is actually looking at the real cluster, looking at the network policies, and intersecting that with the deployment files. So it's not straightforward to understand whether you are in line with certain practices or not, but you can mix and match those capabilities in CI and CD way before runtime and get to a better place of your Kubernetes hygiene, as I like to call it, because at the end of the day, it's kind of hygiene of configuration.
Absolutely.
Definitely.
I like the next slide as well. I mean, in terms of the CVEs and highlighting those. So I think one of the things that we try to do as someone who's managing EKS, providing a managed Kubernetes service, is use security bulletins to inform our customers on what's out there, what kind of CVEs are coming, and also kind of addressing them and as soon as. So we provide detailed guidance on the link, as you can see on the screen, and that's the provider part. But then customers have to look at their own clusters and configurations, their nodes, and that's where the value from someone like you, the tools that you would be presenting, comes in. So yeah, this is a great slide. Let's talk us through it.
Yeah, and Brent, if you want to get like the serious headache, use this slide.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. This gives me anxiety.
Amen.
Yeah,
Wow.
I mean, so this is some work that we had done. So if you really think like, all right, I'm wearing a hat, I'm wearing my attacker hat, and I want to hit a Kubernetes cluster, and these are the techniques that I can actually, employ in order to do certain, activities against the cluster. So for example, to get a foothold of a Kubernetes cluster, you can see on the left-hand side, for example, initial access. What would it take for me to gain an initial access to the cluster? So for example, getting a hold of your Kubernetes config file would be something that will allow me to gain access. But luckily, if you're using EKS, so EKS would actually take care of rotating the secret. So it might be valid for a very short amount of time. So a breach can effectively start with someone's laptop if he has access to the cluster. But at the very same time, if they have an infected image that lands in their image registry that is being deployed into the cluster itself, that's another angle. So at the end of the day, when someone tries to mount a real-world attack against your cluster, they will need to mix and match techniques in order to gain access to a certain asset inside the cluster, pivot within the cluster. And specifically with Kubernetes, you have different moving parts that an attacker can try to exploit. For example, operators, highly privileged components. They can use container lifecycle hooks on the deployment configuration and leverage that to do some stuff. And all of that is actually captured in this matrix. And when you go ahead about building defenses, you kind of look at the matrix and then look at your application and try to intersect the two by, first of all, examining like where are your crown jewels and start building those defenses. Oftentimes it's been called like defense in depth because you really want to have many layers of defense there, but you want to start with your crown jewels, make sure they are well guarded. And then tier one is how can I get to those and then secure the tier that actually enables access to my crown jewels, and so on and so forth. So that's kind of a way to think about, the practice of building defenses for your environment. And the funny thing is that many of the attacks can be mitigated with getting your configuration right. Everybody talks about, least privileges, and the reality is that even the most recent one, actually it's highlighted here, it's a kernel exploit, very exotic one, that an attacker can send a well-crafted packet to the kernel that triggers a kernel exploit that renders a container escape. This is pretty much doomsday scenario for containerized environment. Now, it sounds very exotic and all that, but if you were to run your container without the ability to send those packets, you're all good, even if your kernel is vulnerable. So that's kind of the I want to highlight kind of the importance of doing the configuration hygiene dance with your environment and the importance around that.
That's a good point. Yeah, just because an exploit exists doesn't mean it's exploitable in your environment. So
this is kind of this is something I use in talks all the time. Like image container vulnerability scanning would be an extremely noisy sometimes, because if you have, let's say, not the best practice of building your containers, like you're building them with the OS and libraries that would never run. I mean, like ECR would find a lot of weaknesses, but it's not necessarily exploitable because they will never run on your environment. So if you want to balance noise and making the security team not too frustrated, build your containers, in accordance to best practices. But it's a good point. Like, exploitable and vulnerable are two different beasts.
Nice. Well, what are some of those best practices that we should be looking at, and how does your platform help?
All right, so I think it's a good time to kind of see some stuff. Make sense?
I think so.
I
like seeing stuff.
We want to see the stuff.
Yeah.
We want to see the stuff.
Let's do it.
Yeah, I mean, we did enough slides. So I am switching to my. All right. So let's start with. So the first tool is Scan. It is pretty much a Kubernetes manifest or deployment file scanning, and it will give you the ability, and here I'm going to take an example of rendering a Helm template, which pretty much kind of would look like the same way as if I am deploying that to my cluster. So right here, I'm scanning one of Alcide's template to deploy Kubernetes audit log, security analyzer, and threat detection. And what I am doing right here is I'm rendering the template, and then I would pipe it through the tool. Anyone here going live, you can actually download this right now and scan your files. Like manifest, you can feed it with directories, Helm file, customized resources, and let's see what it yields. So it's a pretty fast run. It basically feeds the entire rendered resources through the scanner, and then it generates a report. So let's open the report. And this is a pretty clean one because we did try to do some of the hardening work on that chart. You can really see here a nice example that the report basically say that my file system on my containers that I use inside my Helm chart, specifically I'm deploying here a stateful set, they're not read-only. And it basically means that if an attacker breaches the application, they can modify the container in runtime. If you do have questions about, what should be a good example of hardening my pod, so you have here kind of a link, and you can pretty much copy paste it to your resources and tweak it to your needs. It takes care of most of the hardening you would ever need to kind of deploy applicative workloads. I mean, normally applicative workloads, you don't need to run them as root. They don't need Kubernetes service account. They need to run on a read-only file system, and it pretty much, you have it all in here, copy paste, and then tweak it, and you can get most of the dirty kind of exploits that we see from time to time out of your application workload. So if we look at the So going back to kind of the slide that I showed.
I just want to add something. And by the way, so like we should create for the show, like when I think of something, because Brent, you can tell when I get excited about something. We should find a way to have like a light bulb like show
bubble. Yeah.
next to me.
That's the aha moment.
But imagine taking this, just this tool, and in a GitOps workflow, I submit a pull request with my manifest, and at pull request time in GitHub, it goes back, runs a scan, and returns that scan to the pull request. Now I know already, like before I even merge those changes, this is how you can be secure before you even start getting that manifest into your environments. Just really cool.
That is the exact use case for this tool. Engineering cycles as a commit hook. You run
I was about to say commit hook. Yeah.
Man, that too. Yeah.
Straightforward stuff.
I have a couple questions. One, the example you just used, you were using it was a stateful set that was being deployed, but the comment, the medium security issue was on read-only file system. It's not talking about the file system on the attached storage, is it?
No, it's actually the fact that you are deploying your container inside a stateful set in a mode that actually enables read-write on the container content itself, which means that an attacker can modify stuff on it. So the spirit behind immutable infrastructure is actually keeping that. So this is an example where the Kubernetes defaults are insecure because normally it breaks applications. So that's kind of I think that the Kubernetes kind of, authors and the community try to make Kubernetes to work for users rather than, being extremely secured and not usable. So that's kind of the trade-off that we see here.
And then my second question is, it generated, its output was an HTML file. Is there a different output format that you might be able to, use in a more programmatic way?
Yes, pick your poison. You can do nice HTML, JUnit, YAML. What else do we have here? JSON. So I think like the regular go-to kind of poison.
Awesome, because that'll help from integrating this into a pipeline as well. So that's really cool.
Yeah.
And I had a question around so this is great, guys. It's like this is evaluating the environment against good practice standard, like for Kubernetes. So in terms of that reference model, like what are you using? Is that out of your experience, like from your customer engagements, or is this something that you have developed? Because that's interesting.
Yes, so this is actually a subset of Advisor Engine that we originally developed kind of to do a more full-blown scan of your environment. So for example, one of the things that the scan tool will pick is if you have AWS secrets in your config maps or pod environment variable. That's kind of, a criminal thing to do. Scan will pick those kind of from that. So it's really based on Advisor Engine, which we will see later. Yeah. It's just a subset that makes sense to apply to Kubernetes manifests. Right. Because at the end of the day, as I mentioned earlier, the reality is that you want to scan against a cluster after the cluster rendered the entire, let's call it stuff, of your application.
Yeah. Great.
All right, so that scan, we're warming up. This is just a warm-up. And if I got Adam like excited and the light bulb is there, so wait, it's coming. I mean, more light bulbs.
It's just going to get better.
All right, I'm moving on. So, I mean, download, scan your stuff. It's going to show you things about your, deployment files that you didn't know. It's really straightforward. Second tool is I like to call it Swiss Army knife for Kubernetes RBAC. So Kubernetes RBAC is notoriously kind of known for being not friendly. Let's call it like that. And in general, like RBAC is not a friendly thing. It's very verbose. It's very challenging, and it's full of power toys. I mean, if you look at the, let me resize my, you have a bunch of tools as part of this Swiss Army knife. You can visualize your RBAC, so it actually will kind of draw a nice graph of your RBAC relationships, like role binding, service accounts, whether they are cluster-wide or namespace level. And you can slice and dice what you see based on namespaces or certain subjects. So it really gives you a nice way to explore and query your RBAC environment. You have things like, which is very nice, Kubernetes RBAC model, unlike AWS IAM, it's only additive. You can only say what's allowed. You cannot say deny on anything. So let's say that I want to have an RBAC policy that says, I want to allow everything except reading secrets. It's not something that you can actually say it in Kubernetes kind of language, but RBAC tool can help you with that. So for example, I have here a way to generate, that's a command line that basically generates this RBAC resource. Here specifically, I said, I want to deny secrets, access, service access, and network policies. And then I want to say that only read on that RBAC policy, and it simply generates that Kubernetes YAML file for you. So pretty much
really nice.
Yeah. And again, this is like real life paper cuts that happened with customers that want to say, all right, I want to deploy something. I'm okay with everything except X, and taking off X from your Kubernetes configuration is hard. What else?
Help me clarify. So when I've had this problem, generally it's because I'm going from one version of Kubernetes to the next version, and the list of resources has grown from one version to the next. So if I have a policy that's saying allow all, then suddenly I'm allowed to do more in that next version.
Forever and ever.
Forever and ever, exactly. So this is a way for us to, as we move to that next version, we can regenerate the policy based on the new version that still might exclude whatever it is that we need to be excluded while including the new things. Because as you said, there's no deny. There's no ability to deny and have that override and allow. That's cool.
Yeah, and using those like star thingy in RBAC, that's kind of criminal stuff. I mean, you pretty much open the door for future kind of extensions, not because you want to, because that's the only way that you can do that. Now, the other thing that RBAC tool can do for you, I mean, for example, oftentimes you would you want to say like, I want to list all the RBAC rules for a specific user. That's a hard thing to understand from just doing kube control commands. RBAC tool will do that for you with the policy rules command, and you can again filter stuff and all that. And what I like to kind of, one of the original capabilities that I wanted to integrate there, and here so the nice thing about RBAC tool is you can specify a cluster context, and it will connect to the target cluster and kind of visualize that. So I'm gonna connect here to one of my EKSs if my EKS credentials are there. Yeah, and as you can see, I limited the visualization scope to my ops namespace, and let's open. Again, it generates a nice HTML report. It's basically a .graph format, and if everything goes well, you can see pretty much visualization of the rules. If you have pod security policies, you can see those as well. So it really gives you kind of, let's say, a more pleasant way to experience RBAC and understand like what's going on. And you can see, I mean, let me actually run it without.
This is a great tool for for clusters with compliance requirements, as in like someone wants they're running PCI workloads or financial services workloads, they can showcase to their auditors or external teams, this is how we do RBAC, and this is how our least privilege sort of environment is working.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely kind of power toy to, and you can see like how complex RBAC can be. I mean, so many rules, and you can probably see here like EKS internal stuff, like pod security policies that out of the box are EKS specific, for example, all in here.
Wow. So, this just goes on with one thing I always talk about is kind of boilerplate, trying to eliminate as much boilerplate as I can so I can just do my job better. And at the end of the day, security is hard, right? Security is just hard. No matter how you look at it, where you are, it's hard. So if we have tools like this to make it easier, I think this enables developers, operators to start thinking security minded in the beginning and not when it's too late, right? So it's tools like this that make it so much easier. I love this.
Yeah.
And again, this is something that you can throw into your CI and like visualize stuff that is part of your CI artifacts. You can pretty much have that as just like you would run your linters and it just Kubernetes specific, sauce to add to your CI artifacts.
And so maybe I missed this, but is there a way to, so as I'm in the pipeline, is there a way to kind of do like an integration type test where I could see, here's my current cluster, here's what I have proposed to go into the cluster?
Oh, I mean, you're raising like something which is extremely painful. Like I want to say, like I want to do a diff between staging.
I get it. Sorry.
So the next tool, Advisor, actually can do this type of stuff. And I think that Pavan actually saw that like early days of the tool. I didn't prepare a demo for that, but I'll show you kind of how to create. So I'll explain like how this magic works, but that is an extremely hard problem with Kubernetes, like comparing two clusters. It's not straightforward. So one of the things that you can do with RBAC tool, and again, this is something that had prior work on actually generating RBAC policy from Kubernetes audit log. So the original work was done by one of Kubernetes maintainers, and I decided to kind of extend it a little bit and edit to this tool, which means that you can you can start with star everything, and then read from your EKS cluster, for example, the audit log, feed it to the tool, and AuditGen will basically generate RBAC based on the actual activity that happened inside your environment. And again, this is Kubernetes Swiss Army knife for RBAC. It's only about RBAC with this tool.
This sounds like audit to allow when building SE Linux policy. You
exactly
fire it up,
exactly.
Trigger an audit entry, and then build policy that allows that entry.
Yeah, that's kind of the main spirit behind it. Normally, for most of applications, you would probably need no RBAC privileges unless you're building like operators or cluster automation or anything of that sort. But normal practice is that for application builders, RBAC is out of bound or out of limit as far as they are concerned.
Yeah, actually, that's an excellent point to just emphasize. If you're building an application and that application is just, an API that is talking to, a database or another API or something like that, you don't need any RBAC rules. There's no permission necessary for that. But if you're talking about an application that is going to interface with the Kubernetes API, that's when giving it some permission. Yeah, that's when giving it some permission is going to become necessary. So that's when a tool like this is going to be useful.
And here's another Kubernetes insecure by default. Kubernetes by default will provision a service account, and you need to have, there's a specific flag that tells Kubernetes like to not do that.
Yeah.
So you can actually provision a workload with no RBAC privileges. In, I think, December 2018, there was a Kubernetes API server vulnerability that actually enables any authenticated user to take over the cluster, which was kind of an extremely severe cluster. But if you could have kind of removed that from your workloads, then you could have kind of prevented that just by making sure that your configuration is taken care of.
It's a good tip.
Yeah.
I think the RBAC tool deserves, I don't know whether it's still there, but we have a website maintained by one of our colleagues, Michael Hausenblas, and it's a list of all the RBAC tools available. So I think if it's not there, I would recommend adding it. It's an open source project, so you can add it to rbac.dev. But this is an amazing project, super impressed around how to manage least privilege and need to know kind of controls around your Kubernetes cluster.
Cool. We're still warming up.
All right.
I'm feeling more secure already.
All right. So I'm moving to Advisor. So a lot of the work that you see here actually started the early days with Advisor. So Kubernetes Security Advisor is basically a tool that helps you deal with all the complexities around taking care of the Kubernetes hygiene of your configuration. So many knobs, so many kind of tweaks that you need to take care of. It's hard, lots of moving parts. It changes over time, and that's the main objective of this tool. And when we started kind of to build a tool, it was just a standalone command line, and then it evolved to become something that, you know, it's managed from our cloud service. You can manage profiles and policies. You can really think about it as like OPA on steroids, or you know, like serious muscle. And some of it is based on OPA. Personally, I'm not a big fan of OPA. I mean, Rego is painful. I'd rather do like, you know, CDK style, like do normal human-friendly programming language to do kind of the security hygiene stuff for you. And that's what Advisor is actually about. Now, one of the benefits that you can get, and again, you guys can go to the Advisor repo, and there's a subdirectory there called assessment. And you can follow the instruction while we are on this session, and by the time we will end, you can get a nice security report, which I will show you right now what it looks like. But it will give you a sense whether your cluster is patched, like your Kubernetes infrastructure, not container images. Your Kubernetes cluster is patched, and let's see how it actually runs.
Oh, I'm nervous.
So again, same motion. We are validating a cluster, and we are fitting it with the assessment profile that is available for download on the Git repo. We update this scan profile, and I'll show you shortly after how you can actually register for a free account on our cloud service and onboard a cluster on a fancy dashboard. And it basically connects to your cluster that is pretty much wired through your kubeconfig. So right now, I have scanned a local kind cluster that's kind of local in my environment. And maybe while we're looking at that, I can scan one of my so the Vel is one of my EKS clusters, and I can all right. And
it's a competition now.
Yes. And all right, so I'll open. So basically, Advisor will generate a very detailed and nice report to digest. And again, same motion. You can generate it in YAML or JSON. I think this one doesn't have JUnits, but you can kind of live without it. But let's take some examples. So the first example is CVEs. Like, for example, I'm running Kubernetes Kind version 1.18.2. And since then, there was a vulnerability disclosed on Kubernetes 8.5.5.9, if you recall in the nice slide with the CVEs. That's a Kubernetes master vulnerability that was disclosed a short while ago. And again, the node, for example, if we have vulnerabilities on the node itself. Now think about running with multiple EKS clusters, and your control plane was being upgraded by AWS, but the burden of upgrading your nodes, it's up to the user. I mean, that's kind of the shared responsibility kind of motion. And upgrading the nodes, it's not trivial. I mean, if you're running stateful workloads, that's hard. But if you're running stateless and you built your cluster properly, it's easier. But at the end of the day, you can pretty much get a good line of sight about everything that is running inside your Kubernetes cluster fleet. And if you go to CodeLab, there's a script. So there's actually a tutorial that will give you the ability to scan all of the Kubernetes, your EKS clusters in the account. So just, go through that. There's a nice script that would actually allow you to do that. And you can pretty much get a nice line of sight of whether you are patched or not patched. So that's pretty much something that you can gain out of the advisor. And some of the other things that we can see in the report. So for example, all the pod security stuff. If we are hardening, so for example, are we applying Kubernetes network policies on my pods? Now, normally here, I didn't do anything, so it will fire as kind of an exception. And advisor can check right now 130 different checks against your environment, including finding secrets, just like Scan does, doing the network policy analysis, doing RBAC analysis of your cluster. So if something can read secrets from an RBAC perspective or spin up pods, you will be able to actually get a line of sight. So normally the question that I get with customers, all right, so I have my Prometheus, something that actually by design is allowed to do that. So in our cloud service, you can actually do all the profile and policy management and create exceptions and all the regular stuff that you need to do from security policy management. Maybe we can see kind of real brief, how does that look like?
Whilst you're doing that, Gadi, so we released CIS benchmarks for EKS recently. Can this be viewed as a superset of those controls? Like we have, there's a set of controls, but then can I use advisor, and then would an advisor be able to create a subset around CIS benchmark controls?
Yeah, so you can definitely think about it as a superset of the CIS benchmark, because some of the use cases that we address here are not necessarily covered by the CIS benchmark. And CIS benchmark by itself, it's a moving target. I mean, if you look at the different versions that were out there, then it started very basic and then evolved from there. We are just running faster than kind of the CIS benchmark. Okay. As you can see here. So this is a nicer way, for example, as you can see here, to consume the report. So specifically here, I have multiple Kubernetes clusters, most of them on AWS. And you can see, for example, that here I have a profile that checks only for, Istio and Kubernetes CVEs on my clusters. And I can drill down on a specific cluster and see, for example, whether the cluster was patched or not patched, and I can zoom in on each and every vulnerability. And again, this is focused on the Kubernetes infrastructure health.
Great. This is awesome.
And, yeah. And again, you can manage, multiple profiles, and you have so many categories that the advisor will analyze your cluster that it pretty much takes care of, all of the security hygiene parts out of your way and leave you kind of more focused on the runtime parts.
That's great. So is that, I mean, those definitions are very useful for customers who are running workloads that need to comply against particular standard. Can they, so people who are using Advisor, can they add their own policies or benchmarks? Or is this something you can provide? Let's say a customer has a security policy, which is a particular organizational security policy, not PCI, not security assessment or HIPAA or GDPR. Can they add, I can see the add new policy button.
Yeah, so you can add new policy profiles, but like adding custom checks is something that we haven't met yet, things that are not exist in the existing functionality. So either we add those with, customer requests, and we will be able to add the ability to have like OPA Rego integrated into that. So you can actually like throw, code if you want to go kind of this painful path of writing, OPA checks, and then you can pretty much have that and benefit, from the management and all that.
So one question from chat from Denny1111. I always start off saying one. Where does it find the vulnerabilities? Is there a database for that? And how can someone add a type of security check to this, or a new type of security check?
All right, so there's basically two questions there. For the vulnerability part, there is no, at least not that I'm aware of, a feed that maintains, the Kubernetes vulnerabilities, because the Kubernetes itself, I mean, it's not RPM or Debian package. Normally, it's kind of deployed or baked into your nodes and control plane. That's one. And actually, the security team at Alcide internally maintains this feed. We pretty much track the Kubernetes advisories and the Istio advisories. And based on the information there, we update Advisor with the information, so you can actually get auto updates of the CVE feeds into your scanner. The second question, whether someone can extend the checks by themselves. So presently, you can only configure the scope of the check, and to some extent, you can tune or tweak the check content. So for example, if you're hunting for secrets, you can add regular expressions of your own that identify, customer-specific resource patterns. Or, for example, we have a check there that have a whitelist of image registries, so you can do configuration around that. So you can definitely tweak the policy around that, but not add like full-blown checks on your own.
Awesome.
Cool.
And of course, when you talk about security, you want to enforce things and break things. So you can pretty much use admission mode, and then it will pretty much prevent things from loading into your cluster. So one nice way of rolling out security is starting with alert only, tune and tweak and all that, and then flip the switch and run it in enforcement mode. So, people are not too frustrated with the security team. Now, Brent, you asked earlier, like, how can I compare stuff? Clusters.
Yeah.
All right. So here's some nice magic about Advisor.
This is what impressed me.
Yeah. So one of the things that you can do is basically you can create from a certain cluster a baseline. So basically think about it as like you have your favorite EKS cluster, your gold EKS cluster that represents the absolute, best of the best security practices implemented in that cluster. And you want to make sure that other clusters looks the same. So what you basically do is run advisor against this cluster. It will generate a new scan profile that matches your cluster. And once that's there, you can scan other clusters. And if there's a difference, boom, you got kind of, exact areas where those clusters are different. So that's a nice way of creating, gold baseline and then catching those drifts.
Yeah, that can really be super helpful. Let me guess. I am Leopard. Does Alcide also work with ECS? I'm guessing no.
No. EKS, okay. Yeah. I mean, you can see everything is with K on our stuff, so.
Yeah, makes perfect sense. And, like the scope of knowledge for understanding the various APIs and RBAC policies and all of that, is it's one thing for Kubernetes, and then it would be completely different for ECS. So that makes perfect sense.
Yeah, I mean, ECS is simpler. I mean, period. It can address a lot of the Kubernetes use cases, and there are benefits of actually going that way as well.
Totally. And then another question came in from Denny1111. Does this need to be run in a node in the cluster, or does it run from your local machine?
API only, which is nice. You don't need to load anything into the cluster. You can run it remotely. For those of you who like GitOps, you can actually, and there are examples on Git, on pipeline integrations, and there's a specific one for Argo. You can run the scan as part of your sync wave, like post-deployment, do like a scan in sync wave. And if there are exceptions, you can actually break the synchronization action, and then Argo will roll back the cluster to the previous state. So if there's a security drift, that's a nice way of doing that. There's a similar motion with Flux. It's pretty much different kind of taxonomy and all that.
That's awesome.
But you can definitely do that.
Adam, did you have a light bulb?
No, I mean, this is exactly what I was talking about, though. Like, it's get rid of the barriers of entry, make it easy to just implement security in your pipeline and as a part of your deployment process, pre and post, and it's just built in. This is really fantastic.
And we didn't even talk about the runtime parts. I mean, the runtime is where all the action happens, but that's maybe for another show.
That absolutely, yeah. We should definitely explore that. Wow. I mean, yeah, we only talked about what did you call it? Supply chain. That half of it. But that was a big half. There was a lot to it. So there's definitely
it gives good color on the fact that Kubernetes is great and complex at the same time, and there are some tools that help you feel more comfortable about it.
Great.
Yeah.
Well, where can our viewers find more about Alcide and yourself, connect to you if they have questions?
Hit me on LinkedIn. I'm not a big user of Twitter, but you can try and hit me, and if I'm not responding, then go the LinkedIn path, GitHub. If you have feature requests, bugs, and just we can connect there. You can roll or onboard your cluster you on our website, so you can have like free kind of account. And there are also more tools that would make Adam have those light bulbs coming soon. So definitely, stay tuned. I mean, ECR and EKS.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, the awesome part about today is we looked at the open source tools, and everything's available online for the viewers to go check out and try it out as well, see the results by themselves and try it against their clusters. So we haven't uncovered the full scope of what your services are. So look forward to runtime as well.
Yep. Absolutely. We should. All right. Well, Twitch and YouTube, we will definitely plan to have Gotti back on to talk Alcide and all of the runtime protections.
Yeah, in
So
runtime, you don't have social distancing.
Okay, so we'll have to go to Israel. No, that's going to be a great show because, like you pointed out, this is all just the buildup, right? And what happens if things change while it's running? How can we, detect that? So that'll be really cool to see.
Awesome.
Yeah.
But watch for that show to be scheduled, and check it out on. If you want a place to watch for our upcoming shows, check out youtube.com/containers from the couch. Anytime we schedule a new live stream, it shows up there. Also, our past shows you can find there, as well as containersfromthecouch.com. And this one will be up on Containers from the Couch shortly. So send it to all your friends, anyone that you know that is doing Kubernetes security, send it their way. This is hopefully going to save them a lot of time. So
Yes.
Until next time, we will see you guys tomorrow.
Thanks, Gotti. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Gotti. Thanks.
Thanks for having
Bye-bye.
me.
Thank you.